When originally I agreed to speak at this conference, I put the presentation deadline on the calendar, which was actually the Tuesday right after Memorial Day. And I wanted to get my presentation done because that weekend, Memorial Day weekend, we were taking the family to Disneyland. And I had every intention, blocked the time on the calendar, but here comes Memorial Day weekend, it's Friday, I'm loading the back of the car. Well, that's actually where this presentation starts, because what I did is I put in all the luggage first and put that in the back, and that was the easy part. But these days, you can't travel without technology. So I have two daughters, one's 10 and one's 12, and they both have iPads from their grandparents, not parents. And before you can put them in the back seat, they got to load them with current movies, right? So you got to load the iPads up with content, you put them in the back seat, you hook them up to power. They both have cell phones, we got to charge those. If we're going to Disneyland, they may get lost. And then my wife is plugged in the front seat, and I have my navigation in the dash, but I also have my cell phone propped up because Luke will probably talk about this, is the maps become stale and you want a connection to the internet so you have the latest information like traffic and things like that. And then I also had a 4G hotspot active so the girls could get access in the back seat, right? So this is what it's come to, travel these days. It wasn't like that when I was a kid, that's for sure. But regardless of all that technology, you still get the question from the back seat, which is, are we there yet? Right? Even with all that, are we there yet? Now, we only live an hour and a half from Disneyland. We live in San Diego, so it's not even a long trip, and you still need to load up all this technology. So my thinking was, you know, if you think about it, we've done the same thing in trucking. So we've taken all this technology, whether it's safety system, telematics, things the truck needs, and we've thrown it in the truck. But are we really there yet with the type of integration we need between OEMs, between software suppliers, and traditional telematics suppliers? And I think we'd all agree, and we've heard many times in this conference, that we in fact are not there yet. So my presentation is going to cover where I think we need to move, and it's not just me, but we've heard it several days over the conference. Let's look at most telematics installations today. You know, these beautiful trucks are rolling off the line, and before they even go into service, we go in and we put in the telematics systems, and we got our drills, and we take the dashes apart, we hide the boxes, and we mount the displays, and we put the domes on the back. And you can see one here, it's got a brace and lots of plastic, and that doesn't look like a happy driver. So if we think about the Disneyland analogy, we were kind of in frontier land the last few years with pioneering these systems. And if you think about where the adoption is really only near, the numbers range, but it's something where 15 to 20% is all we've penetrated in the market. So hopefully FMCSA, Deborah talked today, with mandates coming, that number could go up dramatically, and we could have literally millions of systems to install in a very short time frame. So I think to really gain that widespread adoption, what really needs to happen is the telematics suppliers need to work in concert with the OEMs to really drive that adoption to where it needs to be. Because if you look at what's happening with the regulatory climate, that could happen very, very quickly, and literally millions of systems need to be installed in a very short time. And I think what's really driving that is there's really an entirely new partnership model that's needed between OEMs and telematics suppliers, whether you're hardware or software. And really what's pushing these two hands together, you can't see it off the screen, but it's really the customers, right? Demanding that we come together, tie these safety systems together, drive the cost down further on telematics systems, which is going to help with adoptions. Now, if you think about it, telematics have been around for a long time, and back even 5, 7, 10 years ago, these systems were not 1, 2, 3, 4 times the cost they are today. And if you think about your number one costs like driver and fuel, they were much less, and still back then there was payback. So the ROI is there, and a lot of companies are on their second, third, fourth generation of system. So 3 things today on our roadmap. The first one is 3 concepts I want to talk about. Obviously, we don't have a ton of time, but really drivers and vehicles are not the same. You'll see what I mean. Solving the mixed fleet problem. And third, really talking about the new model that we see emerging in the marketplace. First of all, vehicles and drivers are not the same. So it may seem obvious. I mean, drivers have eyes, the truck has headlights, the truck has an ECM, the driver's got a brain, the engine, the heart. I'm going to stop before I get to the exhaust system, but you get the idea. Now, the point is that a lot of what we've done from either from a truck perspective or from an OEM perspective or telematics perspective is taken these systems, just kind of crammed them all together. The vehicle and the driver, the whole system is actually one, when in fact they are not. The driver has unique needs, as we've talked about in our last session. The driver is mobile. He can leave the cab and still wants access to information. So I think we're really seeing the separation. If you look at Richard's presentation about separating vehicle telematics from the fleet, that's where things are heading. So when we talk about vehicle management, I'm not going to spend a ton of time because Richard did a great job talking about the type of things you're looking for. Obviously, the number one cost, fuel. You can manage that with vehicle management. No driver involved, but just taking a look at the performance of the engine, taking a look at things like diagnostics, taking a look at things like warranty, everything that we just talked about in the last presentation. Now, when we move to drivers, we are talking about things like hours of service, which Deborah mentioned earlier this morning, automating their logbooks. We're talking about integration to dispatch. We're talking about connecting that driver back to the company through things like messaging. And there's more and more applications, scanning and other things that really make that cab a mobile office. So they're not the same, and I think we got to start treating them as different, really different systems and with different needs, but yet they got to come together to work for the best interest of the customer. Now, solving the mixed fleet problem, what is a mixed fleet? A mixed fleet is, if you look at a lot of fleets here in the US, actually most fleets, they are mixed fleets with varying makes, models, and years of truck, right? So if you have a telematics solution from an OEM, and you have multiple OEMs, somehow you got to find a way to make all those systems and all that data work together. And that's one of the challenges we face here in North America. What do we really want to get to? It's that integrated telematics experience, right, where everything is built into the car. I don't know how many of you stepped out and looked at, there was about 20 brand new Lexus cars out in front of the hotel this week. And if you step in there, and I actually sat in there, sat down, put my arm on the armrest, and they had this really cool mouse where you could move it and push a button, and it was all integrated right into the vehicle. And that's what we really need to get to. That's going to drive the cost down, integrate other components and things into that common display, but yet that driver still needs to access software applications that run that overall fleet. Now, aftermarket systems are going to be around for a long time, and by aftermarket systems, I mean systems like Qualcomm and Zeta and others, where the system is installed after the vehicle comes off the line and can be either fixed mounted on the dash or it can be removable like a smartphone or tablet device. And more drivers are going to access information when they're outside the cab, right? So we're going to have those systems work in concert. Like there was a question today on Bluetooth, right? They need to work in concert whether the driver's in the cab, outside the cab, at his home. So when we elevate beyond the truck and the driver and the trailer and we make up a fleet, what fleets really do is they manage the fleet with applications. It could be a dispatching application. Now that we're moving to hours of service, you need a unified hours of service program across your fleet to manage compliance. If you're managing vehicles, you need to somehow pull that information across different makes, models, and OEMs and make sense of it. So I think in the future, when you look at the telematics provider, our theme is going to be more moving towards taking software applications and integrating those for the fleet so we make sense of the data. So we think not in terms of boxes and wires, but we're thinking in terms of applications and how we share data in the future. And then finally, the new model that we see emerging is really starts with that black box, that telematics box that's in the vehicle. You're going to have different makes, different models. You're going to have different black box providers. That's just not every OEM is going to select the same black box provider. And OEMs are going to provide diagnostic software. We just heard how there's a certain advantage to being an OEM and accessing proprietary codes and things like that from the engine and the transmission and making sense of that and increasing some pretty big numbers these days in fuel economy. So that's going to occur. On top of that, I think more and more of the displays that drivers use, the gauges and the applications are going to be in the dash, a lot like that Lexus outside, right? It's just built into the cab. It's safe. It's built into their clean view of the road, right? It's a safe thing to use. But even with that, there's going to be the need for smartphones outside the cab if they're doing deliveries, or tablets capturing signatures. And even for quite a long time, there's going to be the market for these aftermarket fixed mount displays. So the fleets are going to have a collection of these different devices, and the key is really going to be the fleet management applications like hours of service and driver workflow and things up at that fleet level. All these systems are going to have to spin up and get it to the right person, whether they're the dispatcher, the driver manager, the fleet manager, and get them really what they need. So it's kind of a different model. It's a way of thinking about devices separate from software applications, separate from data. Data, for example, we have hundreds of thousands of trucks on the road that are running different power that is represented here in this room. We have a lot of that telematics data that we could share without any further investment by the fleets in new hardware. So again, thinking about the data, separating the vehicle, the driver, these are all new concepts that I think as an industry we have to evolve like a lot of the other industries have to more of an open framework. So that means aftermarket telematics suppliers like Qualcomm and others really need to embrace some of these programs that the OEMs are putting out. They're good for the customer. We all know where fuel is headed. We all know the challenges we're facing with fairings and other equipment and tires and wheels and things we're trying to do. So we're going to have to, as telematics suppliers, embrace those systems and find a way to work in concert with them. Likewise, when it comes to managing an entire fleet, it's going to be up to the OEM to partner with the telematics providers to think about sharing displays, think about sharing data, think about getting applications on a truck where that information can be presented on the internet to the people who need it most, whether it's people managing the company or even suppliers. And in conclusion, really looking at what this new model means, again, it's taking a lot of components, a lot of the things we've talked about, and finding ways where we can interoperate these pieces and really make them work. So in the investments fleets make are secure, and if we look at driving costs down, we don't need two black boxes on the truck. We really don't need two displays, right? And how do we work together to get the value for the customer, make them more efficient, and increase adoption? And I think this model is not an easy thing to do, but I think it's where we're headed as an industry. And I think if we do that, I think instead of these aftermarket installations where we go on and take the dash apart, hide boxes, mount displays, put domes on the roof, we can actually have the OEMs install nice, clean, easy, safe-to-use systems in the vehicle for drivers to use. And that's going to be the dominant thing as we move in the future. And I think if we take this approach, the OEMs, telematics suppliers, whether it's hardware or software, win. But most importantly, the customer is going to have a lower cost system. It's going to be integrated better with this data that they receive from so many sources. We're going to make sense of that. We're going to make them more efficient. They're going to have one unified view of their world, and is really the direction we're heading. So back to my Disneyland analogy, we're probably talking a little bit about Tomorrowland here, but we're definitely on the way from Frontierland somewhere to Tomorrowland, and I always get lost when I try to do that and always have to look at the map. But I think you can agree with me that we are not there yet, but if we all find ways to work together, that in the near future, we'll get there. Thank you.